All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Pat Leonard here from the New York Daily News and the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network and on the Pat Leonard YouTube channel at PL on NFL is the handle. And welcome to Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard, December 5th edition, rolling into Giants New Orleans Saints, a 2-10 team against a 4-8 team that has already fired its coach. And yet the Giants opened as 4.5-point underdogs. And I personally think the Saints will cover that spread. But I'm here not just to talk about the doom and gloom, but also about the circumstances surrounding it. And one of the interesting developments in my mind going into this Giants game, they have 5 left to play. Of course, the season's already decided. We know that it's more important at this point to have a high draft pick as far as the organization's long-term future is concerned than it is to quote unquote win one of these remaining games. But Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen need to show some semblance of progress in order for John Mara and the Tisch family and ownership to believe that they're going to take this in the right direction and they're deserving of using those draft selections, those high draft selections next year. And so a couple victories here, better football needs to follow for them to show some sort of progress. The problem with that is we have seen players dropping out of the lineup like flies. We have Dexter Lawrence now on injured reserve with an elbow injury, expected to miss the rest of the season. Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, out the rest of the season, already had foot surgery. We have Captain Bobby Okereke on the defense, middle linebacker, with a back injury, something that it appeared he had scans done after the Cowboys game on Thanksgiving. And even though in the locker room, Bobby said that everything seemed okay, back injuries can be funny. Backs can be something that it's really up to what the person is telling you, what the patient is telling you. It's an inexact science often, even when scans are done. But this is the thing that happens when seasons go off the rails, when teams lose, and when organizations from the front office on down appear to be prioritizing things other than winning, namely the Daniel Jones injury guarantee, benching decision. And if we look at it now, the decision to start Tommy DeVito over Drew Lock against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one that the Giants organization, whether it's Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, ownership, whoever is making the decision, now in a span of 2 weeks, they have gone from believing truly that Tommy DeVito was the better option when they benched and shut down and then released Daniel Jones to now believing that Drew Lock is the better option. And the reason is because Drew Lock, even though you might not win the game, he's going to be able to put up more points. It's going to look more like a functional NFL offense with Drew Lock, an NFL quarterback, in there operating. Of course, you see some turnovers occur. You see some mistakes happen. Drew Lock, though, getting the right thing, from the organization here, which is a full week to prepare for a game. But it just shows you that week in and week out, the plan is changing. It's by the seat of your pants logic at this point. But really, in my mind, it's governed by how can we get to the end of the season with this still looking like a legitimate competitive operation? Because that's not what it looks like right now. And the Giants have lost 7 straight. If they lose an 8th straight here, if they're on their way to losing 12 straight down the course of the season, with Saquon Barkley potentially awaiting you to possibly win the rushing record in week 18, this is how you're talking about a worst case scenario that results in firings. Now, we've talked about a lot of this before, but what I think is interesting about these player absences, the injuries, you have Raheem Nunez-Roches, another veteran, now out with a neck. You have a lot of interior defensive linemen banged up, Jordan Riley, DJ Davidson with injuries. But you know who popped up on the injury report here on Thursday, December 5th, was Malik Nabers, the Giants' number 1 wide receiver. And why that's interesting to me is that this is a 21-year-old first-round pick who is used to being on explosive offenses and high-scoring offenses and scoring a lot of points and ending up in the end zone and catching long touchdown passes. And he really has done none of the sort. He is on the verge of potentially being on track to match or set a rookie receptions record. He might even get overtaken by Brock Bowers, the tight end for the Raiders, in the same year, while breaking Puka Nakua's record for the Rams. But we all know by now, Nabers is not taking this well. He's not taking losing well. He's not taking the situation well. He already called the team soft after the Buccaneers game. He complained about not getting enough targets. He stood by what he said after meeting with Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. And then after the Cowboys game said, I don't care if I'm dropping the ball, keep throwing it to me. Now, he and Brian Daboll and Darius Slayton all said, comes from the right place. Slayton said, obviously, you can't drop passes. I'm one to know. But they also acknowledge, like, listen, you're a receiver. You're paid to catch passes. That's what you need to do. Ultimately, obviously, it needs to be what you do is you need to make those plays. And Nabers just said in his mind, what he was referring to was being somebody who can't dwell on a mistake or on a drop. He has to move on. He wants you to trust him the next play to make the play. So in that sense, you can understand why the rookie is so competitive and so frustrated and so determined to get the next target, even when he makes that mistake or has that drop. But here's the thing. How is Nabers going to take losing again on Sunday to the New Orleans Saints, a guy who played his college ball at LSU? How is he going to take it if they lose an 8th in a row, a 9th in a row, a 10th in a row? This is also the time of year you have to acknowledge. This is when it starts getting cold. These are the games that are the hardest to fight through. When the fans stop showing up, when the temperatures drop, right? And when you can tell that the team does not have a great chance to win, a great chance to compete, when all the other top players, for the most part, as far as big names outside of one or two, are off the field, or in Daniel Jones's situation, off the team, how do you respond? How do you react? How do you keep it together? I've been watching Nabers this week. He was bundled up almost like he was going out into the snow for an outdoor practice on Wednesday. He had on the full long sleeves, legs and arms bundled up for an indoor practice here on Thursday. I think between the temperatures, between the nagging groin injury that he said has really been an issue since college, and it's something that has nagged him different weeks and different practice days here in New York and New Jersey, not to mention all the losing that's piling up, the frustrations of that, the fact that the offense is struggling to score, is the lowest scoring offense in the league. You have Nabers' association with an offense that really was never crossing his mind that would ever occur to him when he came to the NFL, given his production in college. And as he said here this week at the podium, he said, there's always more for me. I think I could be doing some amazing things right now. Is it going the way I thought it was going to? No, not really, but I'm still going to work on trying to get that out. I feel like I could be doing way more than I've been doing so far, but God always has a better plan for you. You've just got to follow the steps. So really, from a standpoint of the present and the future, Nabers kind of connects the dots across the whole map, because he's an important piece of the now. He's an important piece of the future. He needs to be, no matter what happens to this current regime, a building block for the Giants. And he has to be a centerpiece of what they're going to do in order to turn the offense around and turn the team around. And so what I'm watching, as far as it goes with the Giants here, the team that we're watching on the field against the New Orleans Saints on Sunday, I think Malik Nabers, how he reacts, how he handles it all, I think that's going to be something that's worth following and worth tracking, because of how critical he is to the makeup of this team. Not to mention the locker room now, absent most of its leaders, as far as the people who were leading the team at the start of the season and elected to lead the team. Their captains are almost all gone. Casey Kreider, the long snapper, is the lone remaining captain. Daniel Jones off the team. Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence out for the year. And Bobby Okereke, at least for now, out of the lineup. But I do think they have a very good chance of going 2-15 and losing out down the stretch. And so, not to be all doom and gloom, but want to tell you about what I've seen on the practice field this week, in the locker room, conversations I've had, ready to answer all of your questions about where this team is going, where this organization is going. I want to hear from you about what you want to see from the Giants and from this organization, and how you're going to be reacting down the stretch, whether you're a ticket holder, whether you're somebody who's watching on television, whether you're a diehard for decades, interested in all of that. But first, want to thank our sponsors. So as I'm doing that, remember, please hit the like button while we are live. Please purchase a super chat or super sticker if you want your comment or question answered first. It's a great way to support the channel. And also, please remember to subscribe to the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube channel here on PL on NFL is the channel. Also on the Believe Network. Please listen on audio on the Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen in. The Believe Network also has a YouTube channel. Subscribe there. A lot of great content there. Phil and Matt Sims have a podcast that talks a lot about the Giants, as well as plenty more about different teams around the league and in the NFL. So with that, I'm sure you guys have seen on my social media, but I want to remind you, last week in the NFL, Thanksgiving weekend, I posted, and this is not a joke, okay? In week 13, I posted a 15-1 mark against the spread. That is not a joke. I am not making that up. Those numbers are not fake. 15-1 against the spread in the 16 games in week 13. Now, best bets, Pat's picks, all of the picks that I'm making are going to make you money if you're tailing me on MyBookie. And you need to go to MyBookie Sportsbook now, because if you are somebody who likes to put money down on some football, doesn't matter what it is, the overs, the unders, the spreads, maybe you like those prop bets and my giant sprinkles that I toss out every week. But if you like doing that, if you like playing those odds, watching these games and have a lot riding on it while you're in tune live, I went down to Atlantic City last week and watched all the games. Had the Sunday off because I had the Giants football in Dallas and Arlington, Texas live, and then end up in Atlantic City for a Sunday watching at the Borgata Sportsbook down there. The BetMGM Sportsbook was a lot of fun, but was playing all those odds and playing all my bets on MyBookie. It was a big time win, but here's the important thing. Here's why it's urgent for you to sign up if you're interested. I have been announcing that the Pat's Picks promo code is going to get you a 100% match on your first deposit. As of Monday, that will change and be reduced to 50% match. So for now, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you deposit $50 or more all the way up to $1,000 as a first-time subscriber and first-time depositor on MyBookie, use that promo code Pat's Picks, you will get a 100% match. So that means if you deposit $1,000, you'll get an extra $1,000 in your account. But if you don't do it before end of day Sunday, on Monday, as of Monday, your first deposit, you will get a 50% match. Still a good deal, but not the deal they're offering now. So click on the link in my social media profiles. It's on my YouTube page, PL on NFL. That's my handle on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Threads. And if you go on my X account or my Twitter account, my handle is PLeonardNYDN. Click on that link, use the Pat's Picks promo code, and as a first-time depositor, get a 100% match on your first deposit of $50 or more, all the way up to $1,000, plus a $10 casino chip. Let's win together. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Also, as always, brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning. Drinking some coffee now out of my Salaretta cup and immediately feel the difference. I personally felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. Use that Talkin Ball 25 promo code or the QR code on your screen, and you will get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty coffee concentrate, perfect when you want to make a quick cup of coffee and skip the lines. Takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/Talkin Ball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. And don't forget, pretty soon, I'm going to have the Estate 98 Giants trivia question. So we'll have that locked and loaded. When I ask you my Estate 98 Giants trivia question, the first person to answer it correctly in the queue, in the comment section, will win a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee mailed to your address, your P.O. box, your house, wherever you want. And just so you know, we've had several fans and talking ballers here on the channel who have won a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee, who have then ordered plenty more using the my code, the Talkin Ball code on estate98.com/Talkin Ball to get a special deal on it and to load up on more because they love the product so much. So something to know. And I'm not tooting your horn there. That is legit. So thank you for being here. On to your questions, and we'll talk more Giants. If you want to talk Lions, Packers, which is a fun game that's on right now as we speak, whatever you want to talk about in the Giants world, in the NFL world, let's get into it. Starting with Antonio. He says, Pat, hey, how much would you expect Greg Dulcich to play on Sunday? Hey, Antonio, that would be tough. I mean, I know he's on the active roster. When you claim a guy off of waivers like that, or off a team's practice squad, and you have designs on him factoring in and playing immediately. But usually when you bring in a guy who's cold to an offense, especially an offense that's often cited as a complicated one, this is more likely a special teams acquisition, a guy who's going to help them on special teams. And maybe you get him involved in, here and there for a small percentage of snaps as a blocker. But by and large, that's not a player that you can load up a workload on in the first week that he's joining your team. So usually at this point of the season, for a team like the Giants, who's in their position at 2-10, you're actually more acquiring these types of pieces. First of all, because the Giants have so many injuries and so banged up, you're doing it to just kind of like limp through to the finish of the season. But you're also making talent acquisitions to try to help your team for the future, because the Giants are short on building blocks. It's not just high-end talent they're short on. So, with that said, sorry, distracted here real quick. Got a couple messages. But yeah, that's more of like a player personnel acquisition based on, okay, yes, we need bodies to help us get to the finish line, but also you're kind of trying to do it with the future in mind at this point as well. Okay. Hey, Barb, how you doing? Great to see you. Michael, thanks for the super chat here. Really appreciate that. Looks like you haven't been very friendly to some other people in the chat, though. Thank you for the contribution here, but I'm going to say this is the one and only warning. So, yeah, we don't do that here on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard. So, please be friendly. Please show respect. All right. Let's see. Kyler says, random thought they should make the field goal post a circle like those Harry Potter games. Imagine trying to hit that from 50 yards. Well, Kyler, to be honest with you, Justin Tucker probably would like that idea at this point, because you have one of the best kickers of all time who looks like Chuck Knobloch trying to throw the ball to first base out there. So I think Justin Tucker would probably go for your idea at this point. Barb says she would like to see a Lions-Bills Super Bowl. Interesting. Oh, great. It's the Dex Chunky Soup commercial. Just what I need to see. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's the only time you're going to see Dexter the rest of the season, most likely. Interestingly, I asked Brian Daboll if Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke were both in the building today still, and he said yes. I did not see them. I have not seen them. So still doing a little homework there on exactly what they're doing, where they are, what they're able to do, not do. Haven't gotten a lot of clarity there. It's been more like general comments about the status of those players. I know Dexter Lawrence isn't having surgery, according to Daboll. So need to get a little bit deeper into the understanding of what exactly is wrong with that dislocated elbow, what additional damage was done. So let's see. All right. George says, Pat talking to his sources. What's going on, Pat? Hey, George, great to see you. Thanks for being here. Yeah, was a few minutes late, but working the phones, getting things ironed out on my end. This is a weird part of the season sometimes where, well, first of all, a lot of times you're either in a position where there's a coach GM search coming, or there's not. The Giants are a strange team right now because everything points to the fact that they would be turning over and changing up and, bringing in a new coach and general manager and starting fresh and understanding that it's not okay to be a laughingstock worst team in the league, but the Giants have hung on so far to this general manager and to this head coach. And so, it could be that they're playing out the string, that they're going to get to the end of the season and go from there. I mean, at this point, if you know that you need to be in the hiring cycle, then you're probably giving yourself time. If you're waiting to fire somebody, you're probably giving yourself time to evaluate what the talent pool is, what the candidate pool looks like on both a coach and general manager level. And you're evaluating the people you have in-house compared to who is available on the outside as well. Now, to me, I think the production or lack thereof of the current regime has spoken for itself. So I don't necessarily think you need, to compare their track record with another person coming in. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than it is looked right now. They have 5 games to turn it around here, but very difficult to envision the Giants doing any of the sort, given their lack of talent on the personnel side. They have just lost so many key players, along with the fact that they haven't shown an ability to out scheme their opposition. Now coming down the stretch, you do have teams like the Saints and like the Colts who should be beatable teams, right? They're not good teams, but they are proud teams. The Saints, the Colts are a team whose playoff hopes are not dead. The Saints are a team who has actually played really hard lately under Darren Rizzi, New Jersey guy, Bergen County guy, local. It's interesting. Rizzi was actually saying the other day that he is bringing his New Orleans Saints here on Friday instead of on Saturday to try to get acclimated to the weather a little bit. I heard Rizzi say at his press conference that the Saints have they're an 0-4, I believe, in their last. I think he said 0-4 in their last 4 road games and 0-2 in their last 2 outdoor games, I believe is what he said. Let me see. So yeah, 0-4 in their last 0-4 in their last 4 road games against the Panthers, Chargers, Chiefs, and Falcons. And then losing games outdoors as well. And so those are the challenges that the New Orleans Saints are facing and that they're talking about internally about how to handle this, how to kind of, what do we have left to prove, right? What's the next thing that the New Orleans Saints need to prove? And so that's the way they're talking, and that's the way that they're evaluating themselves. We have, we have Alvin Kamara, obviously a dangerous elite talent and player coming into MetLife Stadium against the Giants run defense that is already the worst in the league. And now you put Dexter Lawrence on the sideline. You put Bobby Okereke on the sideline. You put Deonte Banks on the sideline. And you have a lot of your interior banged up, maybe Nacho, Raheem Nunez-Roches also on the sideline. And you're putting a Giants defense on the field with the kind of personnel that would really be, and I say this with all due respect, but in a lot of ways, a lot of them would make up a preseason games lineup outside of Brian Burns, so very, very worrisome. If you have Alvin Kamara in fantasy football this week, I would start him. And from the Giants standpoint, you're looking for early points because the New Orleans Saints have actually scored well in the first halves of games. And we all know that's one of the Giants' Achilles heels. The Saints have actually scored 115 points in the second quarter alone this season, 59 in the first quarter and 115 in the second quarter. The Giants have only scored 29 in the first quarter and 55 in the second. So that really averages out to about, over 14 points per game in the first half for the Saints and 7 points per game for the Giants over the course of the full season. We also know lately the Giants have had a handful of games where they haven't scored points at all in the first half, or they've only scored 3 or 7. And so, the danger of this game for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen is, and George, just speaks to like the conversations I've been having, This could be the first game that combined with the lack of personnel in the town on the field. And, you have Nabers looking now showing up on the injury report. He's banged up. Is he going to be limited? Is that going to affect his ability to play or his ability to contribute if he does play? Based on the weather, now it's not going to be like 20 or 10 degrees, or it's not supposed to be, but based on the weather getting colder, the temperatures are dropping, the product on the field is worse. And so you have to expect the stadium to be a little bit more empty, the seats to be a little bit more empty. This has the potential to be the kind of game where the Saints go into halftime with a commanding lead in front of a fairly empty or very empty MetLife Stadium. And that's where, jobs end up being cost. That's where people get fired. That's what ends up costing people, coaches, jobs. I think one of my great concerns right now, having conversations, is how do they get to that last game against the Eagles right now? Who are they putting on the field? Like if these players, these key names, like Brian Burns has been playing through injuries all season and he's been battling and he's been pushing through. What happens when a guy like him goes down? I mean, he's one of the last men standing, guys like him, guys like Micah McFadden, et cetera. So George, I think the short answer to your question on what the sources are saying is that, like I told you before going into Thanksgiving, like we're on firing watch every day now. Um, I know Matt Eberflus really, did himself in with that timeout snafu and malfunction and, short circuiting of his brain at the end of that game. It was like he was teetering and on the edge, and then that was it. It was done. Once he did that, everybody knew. I mean, I tweeted it the second it happened. Well, he's going to get fired. So, we look at the press conference after that, the day after, and Eberflus acting normal after the game, acting normal the next day. Then he gets fired later that day. I would say that's how Brian Daboll and the Giants come across right now. It's just kind of a trudge to a march to the finish, a slow march to the finish. Not a lot of emotion to it anymore. Not a lot of enthusiasm, not a lot of fervor, not a lot of belief, just kind of going through the motions to get to the finish line. And so, I don't think anything, I think there's a lot of tea leaf reading going on in the fan base. And I understand why, right? There's no concrete information about what's the next thing coming yet. So everyone's kind of reading between the lines about the scouts and the general manager being on the road, not being on the road. What does the coach say and not say? What does John Mara say and not say? And, I think where we're at right now is I think that they're just going to play it out, go through the motions here. And when things get bad enough that it has to be done and it has to be said by ownership that enough is enough, that's when it's going to come down. That's why I think we're on firing watch now, though, because like Thanksgiving, if that was 40-0, that could have been it. If this game against the Saints is embarrassing and there's nobody in the stadium, that could be it. I think at some point, even if John Mara is really trying to bide his time and stand by his word that he's not going to make in-season changes, I mean, I, for one, would not blame him and say he went back on his word if he fires somebody during the season, if it gets that bad, right? Like I wouldn't blame him for that at all. I think if anything in late October, and I said this at the time, as the owner of the Giants at that time, you're saying something that you want your team and your general manager and your coach to hear to embolden them to do a little bit of a better job so then they can make you look smart and like a man of your word and back you up, so you're saying what you need to say. But John F. says Eagles are looking for home field for the playoffs. This could set up an interesting last game against the Giants. Yeah, that really is an interesting part of it, John. I totally agree. And I have to admit, early in the season, because the Eagles looked like a flawed team, especially right at the start of the season, it didn't seem like that would be much of a concern. It felt like by the time they play the Eagles, then it'll be like what it often is. They're playing against the Eagles backups and, the Giants have a chance to pad some stats and, maybe they get a garbage win or, like a late season win to kind of pad the record and the win total, whatever it is. But the way this is trending and the fact that the Eagles have gotten so much better every week, and they've improved to the point where, they're going to be battling likely with the Detroit Lions for the number 1 seed. This Packers Lions game right now, great game, by the way. We knew it was going to be a good one, and so far it is. I took the Packers plus 3.5. I hope you did too. Right now, the Packers are covering, but it'll be down to the wire, down to the finish. The Detroit Lions are not an easy team to stop, as they are demonstrating up 3 here late in the third. But John, yeah, that's a really good point. And I think the Eagles are an interesting team to remember. The Broncos also fall in this category, even though they're not the same kind of team as the Eagles. But, it's so important to note and monitor covering the NFL, watching sports. It's so important to always note which teams are ascending as the season is getting later and as the playoffs are getting near. Those are the teams that usually are the ones that are going to win those one and done games. And it doesn't often happen that a team gets super hot late and then just crashes and burns. Usually when teams get hot late, they get that momentum, they get that belief. It usually coincides with them staying relatively healthy or healthier than the teams they're playing as well. So you get a little bit, whether there's probably a combination of luck, how you take care of your bodies, your regimen, all those things. But yeah, I agree with you. It could set up for an interesting situation where Saquon is out for blood and the Eagles are out for blood. And listen, we know that the Eagles will do things to screw over the Giants happily, and the Giants would give it right back to the Eagles if and when they can. And they're rivals. They hate each other, like, believe it. And that Week 18 could be seriously ugly if the Eagles are playing for something, because they will willingly embarrass the Giants. And not only could they be playing for home field, John, they also may be at that point be trying to get Saquon Barkley the rushing record, the NFL rushing record all time for a single season. So if that's the case, it could set up for a very interesting situation. Evan Spitzberg says the offensive line is in a terrible state. Lack of depth really hurt this team. Definitely. Looking like as we go into this game, it's going to be Chris Hubbard at left tackle, John Runyon Jr. at left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, Greg Van Roten at right guard, and Josh Azudu, I would think, at right tackle, or Evan Neal, depending on whether Evan Neal makes it. Based on what I was watching at practice today, it felt like Josh Azudu, but Evan Neal was limited. Jermaine Illuminor was listed as limited, but I didn't see Illuminor do much of anything. Evan Neal did a little bit of a walkthrough portion, but then they didn't do the period after that when it looked like they were kind of ramping up to the practice portion with the team and against the defense. So I think we're going to look at Hubbard and Azudu at tackle. Yeah, and that's, Evan, the frustrating part about the state of the offensive line, just like a lot of the positions on the team, is you and I and a lot of other people were easily able to identify these shortcomings and these needs prior to these becoming real in-game and in-season issues. And they just never were fully addressed, whether it was the draft, whether it was free agency. And it was also a compounding problem, right? It was a problem of acquisitions and personnel decisions over the course of the last, let's say, 3 years, where it compounds your mistakes. When you make a mistake on a tackle in the draft, you make a mistake on a guard in free agency, Mark Lewinsky, Evan Neal, et cetera, those things end up compounding. But that's, the scary thing about the offensive line is, they're playing NFL defenses that, even if they don't have, an all-world player like, let's say, TJ Watt, like with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Saints have Carl Granderson, Nathan Shepard, Kalen Saunders, Chase Young, Peyton Turner, Brian Breezy, I know, is back in the lineup. I think he had a sack last week. What do we got? Demario Davis. That's a guy who Demario Davis is a player who I remember going back to last year. He was absolutely fierce. I mean, I remember talking to Saquon after that game, and talking to Saquon about playing against the Saints, and he said that Demario Davis was just a different level of player at that position, at inside linebacker. He really gave it to DeVito and to the Giants offensive line and to the Giants offense in that blowout win down in New Orleans last year. Obviously Cam Jordan as well, down in New Orleans, of course, one of the biggest names on that defense. Now the New Orleans defense has given up points. They'll give things up. It's not like you can't move the ball on them, but what my point is that the Saints have enough players on that defensive front, given the state of the Giants offensive line, to give them some serious problems. AJ says, "Hey Pat, what are the latest news or rumblings on Dable job security?" I would say it stands exactly where it stood for me the last 2 weeks, AJ, which is I don't believe he will be back. I believe that this is just playing out the string. And I think that if John Mara and the Giants feel embarrassed enough by some confluence of events, I don't know why they're not there already. It really does, honestly, AJ, surprise me that they're not. But I think at this point, if you're biding your time to kind of sift through what the candidate pool looks like before making the change at the end of the season, that could be a reason why they haven't made a call just yet. But I think they're blowing out this whole regime. I do. I don't think the Giants want it out there, and I'm not even saying they've made that decision yet. I think that publicly, if you notice, you can see reports kind of trickling out of different areas in the national media about John Mara meant it when he said he doesn't want to make change and he believes in this regime. And right, I believe that too. I believe that he doesn't want to make change and the Giants don't want to make change. And he told us that he doesn't want to make change. But I think if you end the season the way that it looks like they're about to end the season, and if you end it with nobody in the stands and losing to teams that have already fired their coach, and right, like, I mean, this is, I told you guys this on Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard recently, that as early as, in the off season, entering training camp, July, August, I was having conversations behind the scenes with people telling them that I thought this had a chance to be the worst team in Giants history. And not because they had some really good players on it healthy to start the season. They obviously had a Malik Nabers, a guy who was interesting, who looked like he could possibly, kind of help the Giants offense turn the corner in the long run. But I felt like they had ignored some key positions, and also that they had really built the roster and assumed that a lot of the positions that they had not fixed were in fact corrected. And given the dysfunction of the coaching staff the prior year, I just felt like it was all set up for a disaster, especially because the Giants never keep their team healthy. And so the confluence of events between the mismanagement, the personnel misses, the injuries, the turnovers, the game management mistakes, it all has kind of built up to a point where there's nowhere to go but to something new. So that's my take, AJ, but I have to admit to you that nobody now is like the Giants have one thing they have done is now this Giants regime has been very leaky, right? Things do come out of the Giants building, but in the recent month or so, where the organization stands, the pressure that they're under, what's about to happen to them, that is under lock and key. And all we're hearing right now is, Mara doesn't want to make change. He doesn't want to make change. That's all we're hearing. Nothing else is coming out of there at the moment. And I think they, just like Mara did in late October, my belief, my read is that Mara wants to be able to will this down to the finish line in a respectable manner that can help him justify, retaining this regime. But, if it heads in the direction that it's continuing to head in, if they continue losing, and if they continue to look like a laughingstock and a team that can't compete on the field on Sundays, and they are, in fact, the worst team in football, that they're going to have to tear it up, and he'll know that. A2 says it will be another error in a long string of errors if Mara keeps Shayball around, especially Shane. He made the team infinitely worse while making their rivals infinitely better. 100% brutal. Really is. It really is a case study in reverting as an organization. It really is. Let's see. Joey B, good to see you. Thanks for always having my back, my man. John F says Lions should have pulled the trigger on Darius Slayton. They really don't look sharp right now. Looks like Tim Patrick got them in the end zone there. That was good to see. But yeah, I do think I do think they for sure needed. Wow, is that Josh Jacobs for a third touchdown? Holy cow! 3 touchdowns for Josh Jacobs. But yeah, I think the Lions defense right now is really in trouble. They're really banged up. They're down a lot of bodies. It's actually amazing that even down so many bodies on their defense, they're still scoring with the Packers and keeping up. You know, the Packers defense now, I know they're on the road playing in Detroit. It's a hard place to play against the Lions, but they need to get a stop. That's why I picked them plus 3.5. I wasn't picking them to win a shootout. I was picking them to score enough and actually play really solid defense. Saul Goodman says, hey, Pat, what's your thoughts on Bill Belichick talking to North Carolina? I can't see him going to coach in college. Also, Pete Carroll on the Bears shortlist. Saul, that was interesting to see Belichick interviewing in North Carolina. I don't know why he would wade into the NIL transfer portal world that all we hear about is how much coaches are trying to get out of college in a lot of ways, right? So, you know, I think that you hear about Bill Belichick talking to North Carolina. That sounds to me like him starting the process of getting his name out there on the coaching circuit, trying to maybe drum up interest, perhaps. Maybe the interest isn't there as he was expecting, and maybe he's, you know, kind of just getting his feet wet, getting the juices flowing, you know, almost like a practice it's like a dress rehearsal. I mean, I do think it seems like if you're taking an interview like that, you're entertaining it, that idea. Nick Saban obviously is, you know, a friend of Bill Belichick's who did not have success in the NFL, but became an all-time great in college. I would imagine if Bill Belichick is wading into that world, he would be asking Nick Saban, you know, about that world and having those conversations. I would think also that Saban would be telling him this is not the time to get in because we all know Nick Saban said, I'm out when he saw, you know, everybody coming in and asking for more money and an inability to retain people in his program and, you know, the shifting landscape under his feet. So I would be surprised Bill Belichick would do that. But, you know, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that stands out to me potentially for him. You know, if Doug Peterson ends up out in Jacksonville, which I know is expected around the league. See, that's a good example is another one. Like, not that they're the same situation, but Doug Peterson, Brian Daboll, I think they're in a similar spot. They're guys who look like it's potentially, you could potentially just end up coaching out the rest of the season, but does not look like they'll be retained after that, right? So sometimes seems like a foregone conclusion. But Belichick, I would watch his name in Jacksonville. Seems like even though the Cowboys and Eagles have been ones that have, you know, come up, the Eagles, obviously, Nick Sirianni's not going anywhere with how they're playing right now with those coordinators and kind of that system that they have figured out and are running and their strategy behind winning all these games. And then the Cowboys, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like the Cowboys have bigger problems than Mike McCarthy right now. So, you know, the Jacksonville, college, those could all be possibilities for Belichick. But I don't, you know, going to North Carolina, to me, that seems like a strange one for him at his age to want to take on, unless he's arriving with some kind of crazy arriving transfer and NIL and recruiting class all at once. Joey B, my guy, says, Pat, why hasn't Mara made any moves and fired people? Joey, that's a good question. I mean, I think with Steve Tisch being, you know, more removed in recent years from the daily process that we see, in person. Um, it's possible that there's not the same dynamic of John Mara having one idea and Steve Tisch coming over top with, a different or a stronger or a less patient version of a conclusion over what to do with a general manager and coach. His brother Jonathan would be the one who would take up the mantle and be more in charge there. I'm not as familiar with the specifics of that dynamic. So it's possible that John Mara, who, has tried to do right by people in certain situations that they've ended up making changes anyway, it's possible that left less checked or unchecked, John is going with his gut in that sense. I mean, that could be possible. Michael, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. Joey says, Pat, what was Dexter's demeanor after realizing he's out for the season? Joey, to be honest with you, he hasn't been in the locker room, which is weird. So Dable said he's here, but we haven't seen him in the locker room. So I haven't gotten a chance to talk to him, and we haven't gotten a chance to engage with Lawrence and figure out his emotions. I know at his locker after the game, he seemed to understand that it was possibly going to result in him missing the rest of the season. But I'll be totally honest with you. A guy when guys are in that much pain, they give him a couple, painkillers or something to ease the pain. And in that moment, Dexter seemed like he was not in pain, I would say, So that was my takeaway from that situation. So we haven't actually gotten to talk to him with a clear head and kind of settled down and standing there about kind of unpacking it all and projecting to the future yet. We haven't been able to do that. Barb says, Pat, what is your best guess? What quarterback do they draft? Definitely seems like they're doing a lot of work on Shedeur. I know they've sent out a lot of people out there many times. Of course, Travis Hunter is out there as well. Is going to be at the top of the draft too. Shedeur or Cam Ward seems like based on where the Giants are going to be picking, it's going to be one of those two guys. You have to think they're definitely, exhausting their resources on Shedeur Sanders. That's clear though. Hirsch, great to see you. Thanks for being here as always. Joey B says, my dumbass will be there at the game. Wow, good for you. Still sticking it out, Joey B. George says, John Mara owns 50% of the Giants and Steve owns the other 50%. Steve is part of this problem too. If Mara talks, Steve agrees or disagrees. Yeah, and if it's not going to be Steve, it has to be somebody in the Tisch family to step up. George believes Steve is going to pull the plug on Dable and Shane. I do think if the Tisch family has a say-so like they have in the past, that they will weigh in and cause the scale to tip. But I'm interested to see how that dynamic has evolved. Matthew says, hey, Pat, do you know what the Giants think of Justin Fields and what it would take for the Giants to sign him? Is he a free agent at the end of this year? I wonder if he is a viable option at quarterback. What do they think of him? Well, we know that the previous regime, traded back and let the Bears take him rather than the Giants did. Obviously, that was a different general manager and head coach. He is a free agent after this year, so he would be available as like a bridge quarterback. They could have traded for him this past offseason. They did not. The Steelers did. So, of course, they still had Daniel Jones under contract, but we know this current regime did not make that trade, was never reported that they pursued that trade. I do believe that they would like his mobility. I don't know if they are incredibly high on his ability to be a way better passer and player than he has been so far in his NFL career. I also think from what I can see, it would be dangerous to assume that Brian Dable would be able to get the same amount of good football and winning football out of Justin Fields that Arthur Smith did. Because Arthur Smith is a really good offensive mind and quarterback coach. So, my guess would be that would not be the route that they would go. Daniel says, Pat, any cracks in the relationship between coach and general manager? First of all, Daniel, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate you. I think one thing I will say is that there's a lot of discourse in the public realm. It could be on the team's radio station, could be just among the fans in general. You could see some reports here and there. When you see the possibility of like thrown out there that, oh, maybe they'll fire the GM and keep the coach, or maybe they'll fire the coach and keep the GM. When those ideas start both showing up in the discourse, in the national discourse, in the media, always interests me, to hear the different permutations kind of suggested by people who, supposedly are talking to different sources of like where they see it going. As far as what we see outwardly, I think one thing to keep an eye on is the quarterback decision that they've made here in regards to your question. They just made a decision 2 weeks ago that Tommy DeVito was going to be the better quarterback for them to have a chance to win with Daniel Jones out. And then they lost 30-7, and the team was basically caving in on itself in the locker room afterwards. And now, after 2 weeks ago, they said DeVito was the better chance. Now they're saying Drew Lock is the chance, is the better option. Now they're saying Drew Lock gives them a better chance to win and to start. Now they've essentially changed their decision. So the question is, who's making that decision, right? Is Brian Daboll making the Tommy DeVito decision 2 weeks ago, and now Joe Schoen or ownership or somebody else is now saying, all right, that was wrong, like we're going with Drew? Or is it Daboll just owning up already right away to the fact that he was wrong, and now he's got to make Drew Lock the starter because his decision to skip over his number 2 for his number 3 was dead wrong, But that's something to keep an eye on, because that could be related to, is there a collaboration there, or is that one person making the decision 2 weeks ago and one person making a decision now, saying that, no, now I'm coming over top. Now this is what's better for us. I do think what you should be able to see is that they feel the pressure and they see what I see and what I'm telling you. Like Joe Schoen's repentant, contrite, nervous demeanor at the press conference he gave on the bye week. That was a general manager and an executive and somebody who clearly understands that, his job is in jeopardy. That was somebody who sees how bad it is and how bad it could continue getting, and understands that he might not be able to control remaining here. So, but as far as like outwardly things that have been said to us, I think the most recent thing was Joe Schoen saying that he didn't think they had a personnel problem. He thought they had an execution problem, was basically his message at the bye week. I think that clearly points to how the team is either coached or prepared rather than the players that he's picking. But I think we would all agree that even though the coaching isn't good enough, it starts with the players that they have picked. That brings me to the Estate 98 trivia question of the day. So Estate 98, of course, specialty coffee, one of our sponsors here at Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard on the Believe Network. And what I do is I ask you a Giants trivia question, and your job is to go into the chat and type in what you think is the right answer. So I'm going to ask you a Giants trivia question. You're going to enter the question into the queue, and the first person to answer this correctly will win a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. So what you're going to do is you're going to send me, when you win, the winner will direct message me on Instagram at PL on NFL on Instagram, and you will send me either a P.O. box or your address or wherever you want it mailed, and I will mail you a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. Like I said, plenty of our listeners and loyal followers who have won these bottles have come back to me and said, hey, Pat, what's that website again? estate98.com/talking ball, because they want to go get more, order more at the discount that you can acquire with my code. And so it has been a hit. The product has been a hit with our listeners. So without further ado, Here is the Giants trivia question. It is short and sweet. Since the year 2000, there is only one Giants quarterback who has had multiple 20-plus yard runs in the same game. Who is he? Again, since the year 2000, who is the only Giants quarterback to have multiple 20-plus yard runs in the same game? That is your Estate 98 Giants trivia question of the day. If you know the right answer, please enter it into the queue. The first right answer will win a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee. All right, let's see. Saul says John Michael Schmitz is looking more and more like a bust, starting to worry me a little bit. Yeah, especially I would say this, one thing that's concerning is it's watching these other centers like, Graham Barton with the Buccaneers, Cooper Beebe with the Dallas Cowboys. Like these guys are producing and either dominating or controlling the line of scrimmage or just playing at a more consistent, impressive level. And I think Schmitz is a smart guy. He's a well-liked teammate, but he needs to win at the point of attack more. And in the modern NFL game, where defenses have really and teams have really understood that if you can acquire a dominant defensive tackle who can push that pocket on the interior and create havoc there, it can really wreck a running game. It can wreck a passing game. It can wreck a game. That's a pretty big issue. And if, that doesn't turn around, and so far it has not 2 years in here, that's another personnel move and decision by Joe Schoen that you look back at and you say, this was a miss. Timothy says, Pat, what is going on with Jaylen Hyatt? So Jaylen he's been battling some things injury-wise, physically. I know he's been kind of banged up. So that's one thing. He is healthy enough to play, though. And, Jaylen being healthy enough to play and still not getting on the field a lot. I think one issue is that given the state of their offensive line, they are having more and more to keep more protection in for their quarterback and for their line to help out. So they're not able to deploy some of these specialists that they would like to have on the field more. Hyatt only playing 18 snaps in Dallas. I think you look at the usage in that game. Nabers played 95% of the snaps. Theo Johnson played 89%. And then Wandale and Slayton. And then, Manhurts had 21 snaps, more than Jaylen Hyatt. And Devin Singletary even had 13, almost matching his amount. So whether it's running backs, whether it's two tight ends, I think the amount of 11 personnel has to be more strategic that they use it, to have those three receivers on the field. And then they have just shown clearly that they trust Darius Slayton more. Initially, it was Daniel Jones trusting Darius Slayton more, but now they're showing that, as a team, they do, as an offense, as a coaching staff. Not to mention that Slayton is also somebody who is there to kind of help Malik Nabers. He's somebody who is in there to help the rookie, whether it's, getting lined up, whether it's helping with the play calls and understanding, leverage and where they're supposed to be on the field and, kind of guiding the young player. I mean, he's a 21-year-old receiver, but they're counting on him in a big way to produce. And so that's my understanding too, is Slayton has been a pretty big sounding board for him to lean on. All right, let's see. Danny Dudd says Daniel Jones was never a difference maker at any point, high school, college, or NFL. Vinny says, what's up? I love the real stuff. The others act like we are 10-2. I appreciate it, brother. You got it, Vinny. Yeah, you got to call it like you see it. Evan says they should have addressed the offensive line in the draft. There were pictures of Joe Schoen and other members of the front office in Colorado. Does this mean Schoen is coming back? No, that doesn't mean Schoen is coming back. I do think that means that the work they are doing right now is zeroing in on they're zeroing in on the players at the top of the draft that they need to do the most work on and have the most scouting work done on, have the most information accumulated. So they still have jobs. So that's their job. It's very unusual how late they were at Colorado there, when a lot of teams are kind of pulling people off the road or wrapping those processes up. I think a lot of things are optics driven from the Giants standpoint, how they operate. So didn't surprise me that they were seen there. I do think, though, that it's too much to read into it, that it means he's coming back, that he's still scouting for the Giants. I think that would be too much to say. Joey B says the 100 season will go down as the worst season in the entire history of our team. It's such a sad embarrassment. We have to get an annual cigar night going at a home and away game. Agreed. Pat, what do you think of the assistant GM from Kansas City to be our new GM and Aaron Glenn as head coach? Heard those rumors. Talking about Borgonzi and Aaron Glenn. Those are definitely people that deserve interviews. I agree with that. I do think Glenn will get a job. I will say that. He's a name that's very hot right now, and I do think somebody who will get a job. I don't know if it'll be New York, but I would be interviewing him if I were the Giants at least. John F. says, Pat, with the year after year of critical injuries, will John Mara convince Ronnie Barnes to retire? I know how much he means to the Maras, but head coach GM isn't the only thing that needs new blood. John, I think this is part of the reason why you hear outside, some outside people suggesting that the Giants bring in outside help, whether it's from the league or somebody else, and similar to how they brought in, George Young at the recommendation of the league years ago, is that there are a lot of departments in the Giants building that have not performed to the level that they need to, that have not turned over. And, that's a problem. That's something that is unacceptable, and it's not going to change, right? The Giants organization, their productivity, their ability to be a forward-thinking and progressing organization, it's not going to happen if you retain significant amounts of personnel in areas of your building that are not performing at a high level. And while Ronnie Barnes has been very important to the Giants organization from a personal and professional standpoint, the fact of the matter is that department, Ronnie Barnes's department, the training staff department, is just going to, it needs to be evaluated and adjudged just like any other department. You could say that about any department in the Giants building or any department in any NFL building, is that they all deserve to be tracked, monitored, and adjusted accordingly to try to improve the way you're doing things. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they had fired one of their strength and conditioning guys, and one of the guys in charge of helping the players get their bodies ready for game day. And they ended up bringing him back. Howie Roseman and the Eagles ended up bringing him back and deciding, we made a mistake here. There was a right way we were doing things. We don't think we're doing it the right way anymore, and we need to go back to that. And sure enough, it seems to be paying dividends in how the guys' bodies are holding up and how the players are responding to the workloads, to the practice habits, and to the adjustments and how they're taking care of their bodies and their workloads. And so, the Giants have made changes in those areas, but, of course, I mean, we came out of last year and you heard, people making, references to Craig Fitzgerald, the strength coach, the strength and conditioning coach. And like, that was the reason why the team was hurt. It's like every 2 years, somebody else, it's a head coach, like Joe Judge. It's a strength and conditioning coach, like Craig Fitzgerald, like all this stuff. Like, who are the constants while players are going down, dropping like flies, and you're in the top, 10, top 5 of most injured teams every year, All right, let's see. So I'm looking at all of your answers in our Estate 98 Giants trivia question. And the trivia question was, which quarterback is the only Giants quarterback since 2000 to have multiple 20-plus yard runs in the same game. So Evan said Daniel Jones. Joey said Curry Collins, Tyrod Taylor, Geno Smith. Vinny said Eli Manning. Kyler said Daniel Jones. And all of you are incorrect. Come on, who's got it for me? Only quarterback for the Giants since 2000 to have multiple runs of 20-plus yards. All right. Joey B says people online are calling for Al Michaels to retire due to his lack of excitement on tonight's game. Is he really that unexcited about this game? It's 31-28, division game. The best team in football versus a top 7 team in football, and a good amount of points. What more does he want? Joey says, great call, John. I said that about Ronnie Bars 2 years ago. Vish says, hi, Pat. How are you? Good, Vish. How are you doing? Good to hear from you. I'm doing well. Honestly, I don't care about the Giants anymore, and that's the worst when fans start not to care. Good job to the Mara and Tish families. Hope Jessica Tish does a better job running the NYPD, he says. Evan says, Giants need to stop hiring Belichick disciples. It's not working. They need to hire people from smart running organizations who know the game of football in today's game. Well, I mean, obviously you would try to get into the Ben Johnson sweepstakes. And we have a correct answer. The correct answer for our trivia question, the only Giants quarterback since 2000 to have multiple 20-plus yard runs in the same game, Drew Lock. Kyler gets it correct. Drew Lock had 2 runs of over 20 yards against the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving in his first start as a Giant. And he is the only Giants quarterback, even though Daniel Jones had all those rushing yards. Drew Lock is the only Giants quarterback since 2000 to have 2 runs of 20-plus yards in a single game. Great job, Kyler. Kyler, direct message me on Instagram, PL on NFL. Send me your address or P.O. box, and I will send you a free bottle of Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. You can make it. It takes only 10 seconds to make. So it's a specialty coffee concentrate. And it's perfect for when you want to make a quick cup of coffee, whether it's iced or hot, and skip the lines. It's also great as a mixer for espresso martinis. I use it like that. Each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/Talkin Ball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. Also brought to you by MyBookie. Go to MyBookie on the link in my social media profiles. Use the promo code PatsPicks and be a first-time depositor now. Do it before end of day Sunday, and you'll get 100% match on your first deposit of $50 or more, all the way up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip. If you don't do it before Monday, the deal is going to drop to 50% match, not 100% match. So get it now. And we're brought to you here by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. Natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. It is boomchaga.com. Talkin Ball 25 is the code, or the QR code right here on your screen, and you'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. So go to boomchaga.com today. Start feeling the difference. Kyler, good job. Congratulations. And please send me your address or P.O. box on Instagram when you get a chance, and I'll have a free bottle mailed out to you. Yeah, Evan, on your point about stop hiring Belichick disciples, I think that's a fair thing to say based on how directly John Mara and the Giants have been driving towards that tree between the Josh McDaniels and Matt Patricia pursuits and the Joe Judge hiring and the Brian Daboll hiring. And even though it wasn't technically like a Belichick hire because it was more about what he did in Buffalo, he's still ultimately a Belichick guy. I don't think that's a crazy thing for you to say. I think, the Giants, based on their chase for what they're looking for, they clearly seem to be looking in the wrong place. I think that's a fair thing for you to say. Tie game here, 31-31, late fourth quarter. Lions, Packers. Almost seems like the last team to have the ball is going to win. All right. Joey B says, Tish hasn't been around since the loss in his family, but either he has to get back on the horse or hand over the reins. Mara's becoming Jerry 2.0 and out of touch. I feel like, unfortunately, I think they scare it up and take Travis Hunter as they wait for Arch Manning. Interesting. Vinny says, if Daboll is the coach next year, I want you to ask him every week on starting in week 1 if he is worried about his job. I love it. Whip it all out. Well, I knew this year going in that his job was on the line if it went in the tank. And sure enough, that's what it has done. And it has. He got a couple wins early on to stave off the despair and the early mid-season firing, but definitely seems like it's going to be hard for him to stave it off in the long run down the stretch. Saul says playing Tommy DeVito a couple weeks ago was this year's version of the free medium Pepsi we got from Mara a few years ago. Good reference there, medium Pepsi reference. Vinny says, why are we so hyped up about Daboll and Shane? Daboll calling play calling is straight trash, and Shane's drafting sucks. What are we doing here? The list goes on. I agree. I think their time has passed here. I think they had a chance and it didn't go well enough. Matthew says, Pat, who would you sign as a bridge quarterback if the Giants draft Sanders or Cam Ward? Let's see. Well, there's always a chance quarterbacks get cut. Guys who aren't like technically, trending towards being free agents, let's say, but teams release them. So you always have to keep an eye out for that. As of right now, the quarterbacks who are due to become free agents are Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. Jameis Winston, though, that would be an interesting one to actually come available considering what he's doing for Cleveland right now. I wouldn't expect that. Let's see. Dalton, Brissett, Rush, Flacco, Mason Rudolph, Tyler Huntley, Mac Jones, Drew Lock, Marcus Mariota, et cetera, et cetera. That's a tough one. I mean, I can see why you're picking Justin Fields out of that. Those who are, I think Jameis Winston is fascinating and fun, and a guy who will, one thing you want to do if you have a bridge quarterback next year situation, you need to have at least somebody who's going to deliver the ball consistently to your weapons, to Malik Nabers, to get the ball out, to make plays, and I think that, that intrigues me, but obviously with what he's doing for Cleveland, that might be difficult to make happen. So that's the name that intrigues me the most is Jameis. I know pick sixes aren't good, but he's giving his team a chance to win every week. That's what I see. I don't think you'd get as much out of Fields as the Pittsburgh Steelers have. To be honest, it's a scary situation to say, hey, let's. What's funny? What's funny is like, could you get Tyrod back over here to New York? Like they've had the guy in the building, right? Tyrod, even, Daniel Jones would have been a good bridge this year if you had drafted a quarterback underneath him and then replaced him with that quarterback, right? Like it's all just, they're just not aligning it properly. Timothy says, how does Kafka feel about this season? I think he's just playing out the string, keeping his head down. That's what it seems like to me, trying not to rock the boat. He's been opening his last couple press conferences with opening statements, probably trying to do his little head coach audition thing. I think he'll be somewhere else next year for sure. By the way, congratulations to Darius Slayton being nominated as the Giants nominee for Man of the Year, NFL Man of the Year. Slayton, a good person, good teammate, helping to do work in the community, actually through an initiative that was started during COVID by Joe Judge and that staff and that regime that has really taken off. So credit to Darius Slayton, good person, good player. Let's see. Barbara says, yeah, I'm passing on drafting a quarterback this year or next. Got to think out of the box, sign free agent or trade. Gary, great to see you. What's going on? How you doing it? Or how are you doing? Sorry. Joey B says, hey, where's our boy Tuto been, Pat? That's a good question, Joey B. He always checks in, though, with a ton of support, and I expect he'll be back soon enough. But that's a good question. I'm sure he is practicing with the mates and putting in the work with that rugby team over there. Gary says everyone is laughing at the Giants because all the players that leave are doing better. Yeah, it really is something to see, Gary. How much success these former Giants are having. Barkley crediting his success with his, quote, fresh start is how he put it after one of the games recently. And, I think that it's indicative of it's not just about, oh, they're going to better teams. It's also about going somewhere they feel appreciated, going somewhere where they feel rejuvenated, and going somewhere where they feel like they like the way that they are viewed and treated, which is not something that's going well here under this current regime. Joey B says, Pat, give us something juicy. Give us something you got that ain't out there, but could be. I know you got something up your sleeve. Joey, nothing that I'm yet ready to say, but I'll tell post game live after the Saints game, maybe will be time to share some things. And if not, then maybe next week, but still reporting out some things. So, I'm not gonna let anything go just yet. I would say, here's what I would say. I would say that there just aren't there aren't that many players left to run the locker room anymore. Like Dable was asked about his absence of captains and leaders, and he mentioned Greg Van Roten as one of the remaining leaders and veterans on the team. That's your right guard who signed at the start of training camp. Like, that's not the person that should be responsible for this, or who's going to stand up and talk to the team and rally everybody. And like, that's, they're just in a weird shape and weird way as far as a team that needs voices, needs leaders, needs structure, needs an ability to find a way to fight to the finish. It's just very hard to see it coming together for them in some of these final games. Not to mention, they have the Baltimore Ravens coming down the pike. Okay. They have a game against the Baltimore Ravens after the Saints game. I mean, my goodness. That's going to be a tough one. Great game tonight. You're right. Barbara says Saquon stunk here, turned down the same contract basically that he signed over there. Plus, he kept telling the Giants. No, he didn't turn down the same contract. That is not true. That is not true. He got more money from the Eagles. He got more money from the Eagles. But Barbara, one thing that is true is that I did think by the end, like Saquon was saying, he wanted to still be a Giant. He did. But by the end, I do think both sides knew it was time. That is one thing I do believe as well. But it only got to that point because of how the previous negotiations were handled. Joey B wants Jameis Winston too. Yeah, my man. Saul says, interesting how a lot of defensive coordinators and other position coaches didn't want to come work under Dable. Wink was onto something and doesn't get enough credit for their playoff appearance in 2022. No doubt about it, Saul. Wink does not get enough credit. And yes, what he was showing everybody was that this operation was not what it seemed to be. That's what I thought. Bo Nix was right there for us. So was McCarthy. Yep. Everybody has to go. Shane, all his assistants, and Dable, and all the assistant coaches. Yeah, the Bo Nix development and the fact that he's a rookie of the year contender, it really is piling on when it comes to the Giants' mistakes. No doubt about it, especially from the standpoint of they could have had some young quarterbacks in here. Kyler says, I feel like they'll do some optics BS and bring Wink back and label it the reunion. I think Wink fits his team better than any DC available other than maybe Vrabel. I doubt as long as Brian Daboll is the head coach here that you'll see a reunion. Maybe if Daboll wasn't the coach here, the Giants could make that effort. But, outside of that, plus looks like Michigan is loving what Martindale did in that Ohio State game for sure. So, he seems to have some leverage down there in college, although a lot of times these guys who have pedigree in the pros, when they get back into the pros, they go back to the pros. Barbara says Tuto is with DeVito. He doesn't watch the Giants. Vinny says, Big Pat, outside of LT, who is your favorite Giants player of all time? Bring us back to when we were great. Saluti. Vinny, that's a good question. Favorite Giants player of all time? I'm partial to Justin Tuck and his toughness. I mean, I went to Notre Dame with him. So fellow Irish Notre Dame guys, and somebody who sets a tone for a locker room, for a defense, for a team, elite athlete, competitor, just a guy who, because he was on your side, you felt like you were going to win that day type of player. He's the first person who comes to mind for me. Even though he was a very mercurial and different dude, and it was up and down, Shockey was always fun to watch, I think, for sure. And he was always an interesting and talented and fun player to watch. Not my favorite Giant of all time. Big Leonard Marshall guy. Love Leonard Marshall, what he brought as a player, who he is as a person. Huge fan of his. Phil Simms as well. So those are some guys that jump out to me. Ken says, I wonder if Tisch ever wants to cash out, take his 4B, and rid himself of this misery. Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is definitely a situation where the entertainment value of what the Giants have brought over the course of the last decade is really lacking. And that's really what Steve Tisch is an entertainer and a businessman, right? Joey B says he's bringing his kids to the Ravens game. Man, oh man. Well, I hope they like watching touchdowns no matter who scored them. That's what I would say. Barbara says, let's trade players for high draft picks for the future. These players don't work here, so who cares? What do they do on another team? We care about the Giants. Well, yeah. Well, Barbara, you definitely want to acquire assets if you can for players with certain contracts you don't want to take on and things of that nature. But you don't want to get rid of good players and not improve your team. One thing that the Giants have somehow been able to do is get rid of good players. The team gets worse, and they're in a position where you're wondering, okay, if we're not getting it out of the draft picks and we're getting rid of the good players and our team's getting worse, when are we getting better? How are we getting better? So there needs to be like an equation, like an equal sign, and then an answer to the question and to the equation of what do those acquisitions and draft picks turn into, and how does it turn us into a better team? So what you said can be absolutely true, but I think in large part, Barbara, one thing I see with the Giants as an organization, and they're not the only team that makes this mistake, but I think in large part, NFL teams and NFL locker rooms, even like you talk to players, like you don't get rid of good players. Like you try not to get rid of good players. If you have a good football player on your team that makes your team better in a certain area, you want to try to keep him on your team. I think that's a pretty good rule. Now, yes, there are definitely some times when guys are looking for, contracts that you disagree with, and you have those disagreements, and, that happens. But, I think that making a habit of getting rid of bad player or making a habit of getting rid of good players is a tough habit to keep a competitive team. Joey B says, remember last game that Wink had something on his folder to play devil. What was it? I forgot. He had like the 24. He had like Jack Bauer, like shooting his way out, like 24 style on the back of his play sheet. That was quite a sight. Barbara says Eric Bieniemy got fired again, I noticed. Yes, at UCLA. Interesting. Has a lot of friends in the media, but hasn't been able to go out on his own and succeed. Ken says not drafting a quarterback last year, a bigger stain on Shane than giving Jones what was essentially a 2-year contract. Imagine the optimism if we had Bo Nix and Brian Thomas Jr. with our second. Barbara says, Pat, I hope the Irish win at least the first game in the playoffs. I'm proud of what they did this year. Thanks, Barbara. Agreed. I might even go to that playoff game. We'll see. Saul says, how did Tiki Barber treat the media back in the day? I wasn't covering the team back then. That would be a better question for one of the guys on the beat back then. Kyler says, bring the red jerseys back, make the color rush away and the legacy home jerseys and get a new stadium. The AC unit in Jersey sucks. I love the red jerseys. I totally agree with that. Matthew says, if Daboll somehow stays, do you see Bowen here as well? No. But also, I don't see him here another season. But here's the thing. You're gonna fire Shane Bowen and let Brian Daboll hire a third defensive coordinator? Like, what? That would be – no, I'm not criticizing you, Matthew. I'm saying, isn't that insane to think about? Like, what retaining him would mean hiring a third defensive coordinator. Like, it makes no sense, So, FYI, the Lions just kicked a field goal and won, and the Packers covered 3.5. The hook. That's a W right there, as Jameis says. W. Barbara, no. Jeremiah Love on Notre Dame is not related to Julian Love, but both Notre Dame standouts. Then he says the only player Shane got rid of is Darren Waller and Tony. Everyone else is doing great. Unreal. He didn't get rid of Darren Waller. Darren Waller retired. He traded for Darren Waller. Ken says, I'll be at the game Sunday, Pat. How do I get an autograph? Whose autograph? Talking about the players? The players you end up, I believe, like their player entrance, it's kind of around the side of the stadium when they're coming out. Actually, Joey B can tell you when they're coming out of the stadium there's an area. I can definitely try to meet up with you, Ken, if you're going to be there. Send me a direct message on Instagram, PL on NFL. Direct message me there and tell me where you are in the morning, whether it's in the parking lots or when you get into the stadium. Tell me where you are, and I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can meet up with you if I have time before the game. See if I can meet up with you and say hi and sign something. Go Irish. That's right, Barbara. It's by the Bud Light Gate. All right, yeah. So Bud Light Gate for players. Ken, direct message me. We'll see if we can connect during the game day here for the Saints game. All right, so we are brought to you here by MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98 Coffee. MyBookie, go to that link before the 100% match runs out and use the promo code Pat's Picks. 15-1 against the spread last week. Use that Pat's Picks promo code, get that 100% match before it's too late. Drops to 50% on Monday. Also, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants, and heart-healthy compounds. Talkin Ball 25 or the QR code right here, Boom Chaga. Go get that 25% off now on your first order on the subscribe and save option. BoomChaga.com today. Start feeling the difference. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee. It's a specialty coffee concentrate, perfect for when you want to make a quick cup and skip the lines. Takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/Talkin Ball to get an exclusive offer for 80% off your first order. Barbara, thank you. I'm crushing it on picks right now. That's why I'm trying to make people money before I go cold and it's too late. That's why I'm telling people to sign up now. Probably can't do a cigar, Joey B. Saturday, family in town, but definitely some other time soon. Kyler says, do you want to think Trader Joe would consider trading down for picks, maybe take a Mason Graham for Dexter and get Milroe or Tet McMillan wide receiver and pair him with Nabers with a 20-year-old Drew Alar? That could be a possible smart way to go, is to trade down and get volume as far as picks and ability to restock a roster that is lacking in talent, in a lot of key areas. I don't hate that idea, but they do need a quarterback desperately and badly. But I do agree with you that, it is tempting and potentially appealing to get several key players in a trade down. Saul says Neal and Thibodeau are unforgivable misses at 5 and 7. Shane needs to go run to Bean and beg for his old job back. Thank you, Barbara. Vinny says best interview and worst. It's cool to ask beat guys. In my career, Henrik Lundqvist, Eli Manning are both up there. Odell was always engaging. Darius Slayton, great interview, great guy. Julian Love was good. Andrew Thomas, always stand up and above board and very good. Brad Richards, when he was on the Rangers, was phenomenal. Maybe the best. Just incredible insight, really smart. Fun to talk to, new hockey, new life. So really fun. But yeah, Henrik Lundqvist always stood out to me, but Eli was great too, especially accountable after losses. Darius Slayton, definitely. Benny Fowler, who does the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast with me on the Believe Network. Great interview as well. Joey B says, I think Kayvon is gone soon. That would not surprise me. Nothing I know other than I've seen people talk about rumors of that the Giants are going to move on from him eventually. And that wouldn't shock me. I mean, I think, I've said this before, but I think very much like the Giants investment in Brian Burns, I think a lot of people said, well, they're pairing Brian Burns with Kayvon Thibodeau and they're creating this big defensive line. I think that was as much of a statement about what they feel like they didn't have in Thibodeau, that they had to go out and pay that money at that position after making that draft pick on a player at number 5 and still had that need, I thought that really jumped out to me there. So I do agree with you that that's coming down the pike. Barbara says, Pat, I know it's crazy, but I'm trying to think of ways could we possibly acquire more Burrow or even Stafford until we get Arch. Worth looking into. I mean, is Matthew Stafford going to move his family to this team and this setup? From if he's going to continue playing, then from what he has with the Rams and with Sean McVay, with an offense he knows, and with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that might be tough to envision. And then Burrow, yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I wouldn't think he'd be going anywhere. Is Dable a fraud at offensive coordinator, says GM Pedroza? I mean, I think the stats seem to speak for themselves that outside of his years with Josh Allen, Dable has struggled to mount a consistently productive offense. So that's just fact and stats. So that is a concern. I think that, like I was on the radio with Bruce Murray and Rich Gannon, the former NFL quarterback, on Sirius a couple weeks ago. And I said to Rich Gannon about Bo Nix and the potential that the Giants missed on Bo Nix and could have developed him here. And that's, now he's a rookie of the year candidate in Denver. And Gannon said something like, well, I think we all know that if he was in New York, he wouldn't be a rookie of the year candidate. And so I think that says as much as anything, is that kind of statement. Kyler says, who do you think is the best quarterback in your eye? Me personally, I think Dan Marino was better than Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Steve Young in Montana. He never had the weapons as the others and was amazing. Yeah, I don't hate the Dan Marino pick there for sure. Brady was definitely smart about knowing how to play within the structure of the game to win that game. I think Rodgers at his absolute peak was the best, maybe, of the guys that you mentioned there. I think when he was at his absolute best, it was hard to envision someone playing the position better than him. Young was such a combination of skill and toughness, was just magnificent. Montana, obviously, incredibly clutch. And yeah, I don't hate your Marino comment there, though. I think Rodgers' best maybe is the best, but is he a true winner? But I think like I went around the Giants locker room one time several years ago, and asked them who would they prefer, Brady or Rodgers, when they were both still winning MVPs and Super Bowls and stuff. And almost every player to a man was saying Rodgers. I was stunned, but there's that much respect for him in the NFL. Vinny says, if I was a running back, I would love to run a counter or a sweep and go right at Burns or Thibodeau. They can't stop the run. Giants really do struggle on the edges. They haven't been any better on the interior, though, too. Burns and Thibodeau doesn't remind me of the recent great New York Giants defensive ends. They seem too light to hold the edge, says NYOG. Barbara would take Brady over Rodgers, and she misses Eli. Many people do around here. Many people do, Barbara. Saul says, Dable comes off as arrogant to me when he's addressing the media, like you guys to know anything. Like you guys don't know anything. Seems like he's speaking down to all of you. I also hated his feet up on a desk on Hard Knocks. The feet up thing was tough to take. It still surprises me that ownership dealt with that. As far as being arrogant, I do think this regime, GM and coach, have struggled at times to handle frustrations at the microphone. I do think now, though, it feels like more than ever, Dable is more kind of playing out the string and closer to emotionless because of how bad it has gotten. Joe says, Pat, get some sleep, brother. Thanks for another amazing live. Let me know if you meet Sunday. Before going in, I'm bringing a buddy of mine who's a huge fan to his first game. That's awesome. Joey B, I will take your cue, and I want to thank everybody who joined the chat tonight, particularly Daniel for that super chat. Michael dropped some in, and some great questions from Vinny, Saul, Barbara, Joe, and everybody else who weighed in. I think that you guys are so supportive of this channel, and I'm so grateful to all of what you guys bring as far as driving the conversation and supporting the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast on the Believe Network and on YouTube. This is Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live. Barbara says, good show, Pat. I love it. You got it. And she makes a good point. Arrogance is forgiven if a coach is winning. You're absolutely right. That is very well said. And we'll leave with that, which is that wins can make you feel better. Consistent losses, though, is what helps the misery and the frustrations and it almost compounds on itself. So we've seen it result in injuries. We've seen it result in 7 straight losses. And of course, Daniel Jones now on the Minnesota Vikings, the Giants almost down all of their captains, only Casey Crowder, the long snapper, remaining. Malik Nabers crops up as limited at practice due to that groin injury. The weather's getting colder. The games are getting tougher to slog through. How are the Giants going to finish down these 5 final weeks? Are they going to get another win? It's looking bleak. It's looking desperate. It's looking difficult. We'll see if they're able to pull out another one and limp to the finish line, but on their feet. Thank you so much. Great to be here with you guys. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, thank you so much. Please join us next time live on YouTube and give that one more like button a flick, a hit, a click before we get out of here. See you later. Thanks again.